would like to invite back onto the stage Kirin and Paul. So if I can get you back up, wonderful. And so what I'll do actually is I'll start off by asking a question that actually came up for me, chair's sort of privilege here. And it was, I think this question is to both of you, but it was prompted by something Paul said, which was around authenticity. Just tell me a little bit more about where you see authenticity laying in this conversation. And who would like to go first on that out of the two of you? Or I'll choose Paul.
Okay. I would say for me, the authenticity piece has, and I'll try and be really quick and succinct. I know we've got limited time, and I'm sure Kirin has got a view. If we look at ESG was originally GES, and we flipped the acronym in the UN in 2004, right? Normally, you'd lead it with governance. And the reason we flipped it was because GES sounds technical and not very sexy. It was purely tabloid, and it was purely a conversation one afternoon. Environment wedged up front, begin to get metrics. G at the end, business understands the importance of government. S is the difficult one, stick it in the middle, it won't be flicked off. So look, that's an ESG anecdotal story. But to answer the question, the authenticity piece is because I think governance has become under such a forensic lens in terms of governance for some companies is box ticking and filling in forms, and it's not in the culture. And it's become, I think there needs to be a transition to governance, to authenticity back to governance, where boards really take control of companies and they're well led and well advised by the legal compartment. So I'll leave it there. But the authenticity piece is because I think there is so much mistrust of disclosure, transparency, and accountability, which have become very cheap words. And I think that extends to the point I made about the failure of trust across society, young and old, of institutions in government or business, right? The GC that can help its company project authenticity in terms of what we do, how we govern ourselves is serious. And I know there are many companies who do it, but I think as a currency, it's become cheapened. And I think it needs to be rebooted. And I think GCs Kirin are the first mates. If you lose control of the ship, the skipper might be in his berth having a whiskey, but the GCs control the ship. And I think that's my point. I'll leave it at that without tiring that metaphor too much.
Wonderful. So Kirin.
I think Paul mentioned one point that I was going to mention about the box ticking exercise, because especially when you mention governance, people very easily then float into that, oh, I have to do it, and that's why I just have to find the right things to tick all the boxes. And I think, and that especially in any environmental or climate context, is the tail wagging the dog. And I think as in-house counsel, you've got an important role to play to make sure it's not the governance that is, so to speak, the tail. And unfortunately, it is the last letter, which was great to hear your explanation, Paul, why it is the last letter. But you don't want the governance to be dictating what people decide to do in the context of E and S in the ESG context, because that is the tail wagging the dog, and you're just doing it to get the numbers right, for want of a better word. And that's where the authenticity comes in. I think you need to believe in the first two elements, the E and the S, and then the G will come naturally. But obviously the G, from an in-house legal perspective, is absolutely crucial to get right and make sure it is right. But you can't have the one dictating the other, even though government will use the latter in order to get you to do the E and S. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be perceived as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great response there. So I've had a couple of actually related questions come in from the audience. The first question was regarding what's people's perspective on the upcoming COP and I think Paul might be able to answer this well. And will it be more consequential than many of the others? Obviously, COP21 was a bit of a high point, but a lot of the other COPs have not necessarily delivered to the level we need. And then actually a related question to that is that, given that they've maybe been a bit stop-start, can the private sector leapfrog the public sector? So I'll go to Paul again first on this, and then see what Kirin can add to that.
Look, COPs are much more Harry Potter than they are Albert Einstein, right? It's about political momentum, and it's about, in some ways, that almost intangible geopolitical atmosphere. And the reason I'm optimistic about COP26 is not because of Boris's slow start or his minefield in Cumbria or any of those things. The stars are aligned where you have a G7 government with the machinery to work with other governments to get a result. Now, as I said, I think briefly in my talk, the French were immaculate. They saw the failure in Denmark of COP9. They said, we're not going to fail. And they put 2 years of diplomatic outreach to work with the G77, the developing countries, the emerging countries, so that when they came to get together a result. I think the dynamics for COP26 are different. I think we've had the Trump period of factious geopolitics, and we've still got issues. But, you know, the G7 meeting we've just had in Devon, it looked as though the grown-ups were in control again, right? So I'm being very simplistic. You take that atmosphere into COP26. It's about relations. It's about the need for success. So it's never done till it's done. They'll negotiate until the last minute, the last hour. But I think the momentum in terms of public perception, finance and investment, the lawyers on climate change, and government's collective need at G7, G20 and beyond for a win, give it a chance. The preparation has been poor and limited because of COVID. But I think, and if you get a success at COP26, all that is momentum for the next few years, and it takes it on. And I think finally, the parts of the general public, you know, whether I'm in the Sahel or in East Africa or in Brazil, or people are now deeply concerned that climate change is real, it is impacting them. And we've heard your panelists speak about their children, whether 3 or 6 or teenagers. So, sorry, Kirin, I'll stop there. But, you know, fingers crossed, I think Glasgow could be a win.
So with this, actually, I will go to the sort of second part of the question, Kirin, and I won't make it too politically loaded for you, but so I'll slightly reframe it. How do you think the private sector holistically, or maybe even specifically down to organizational level, can take leadership, and so that we're not just relying on the public sector and governments and politicians?
Yeah, I think, Adam, to answer your question about COP26, there is a piece around, the one is politics, the other one is doing the right thing. And Paul put it much better. Harry Potter, couldn't have thought of a better description for it. But I think that the important thing is for private organizations to think about, well, what is it that is important for us as an organization, but also fits into what we stand for as a business. So around your values, around what you want to be seen as by the outside world, be it your customers, your other stakeholders, and then do what is the right thing to do. I think the challenge with politics, and COP26 in my mind is part of politics, is if you wait for that to be the driver, then that is going to be too late. I mean, the Climate Change Committee has already said it's lagging behind. There needs to be much more drastic action, and it's just not coming fast enough. So yes, as an organisation, you can do lobbying, you can do, you know, the positive stuff for government to actually put those measures in, and that is something we do as an organisation because it fits into our values and what we want to do from an energy transition perspective. But that's not necessarily going to be the right thing for every organisation. So I think every business needs to work out what is right for them, what do they want to stand for, and then implement that. If that then ticks the whatever criteria there are, the G in ESG, then that's great. And we're coming back to almost my answer to the first question. But that should not be, you shouldn't wait for politics to catch up before doing something on this, because that is likely to be too late.
But yeah, now what we're going to have, actually, I think, Paul, you might have a follow-up to that, and actually that will make that the last point, because we need to start we need a 5 minute or so wrap up period. So if I can hand over you to have the last formal word from us.
Look, I couldn't have agreed with Kirin more, and just a footnote on that. So from the late 90s until Paris, in many ways, the private sector in the COP context was on the back foot. They were going along, there was a lot of energy, there was a lot of effort, there was some negative lobbying, there's positive stuff, but it was like they were watching the circus. And what we learned during that period, and I've both been a UN official and private business, was, you actually had a lot of UN officials, diplomats, bureaucrats arguing around 15% of the finance that would be needed to affect climate change. They were all focused on public expenditure, public budgets, and all of that. And there was 15 years lost. What's my point? The only way you really have an impact in climate is moving trillions of dollars. Governments in a fiscally constrained environment will never do that. You have to get the private sector, the capital markets, and all those different facets of the investment chain on side, incentivized, and central to the discussions. It took us about 15 years hard wiring to factor finance, asset owners, insurers, reinsurers into the climate discussions. And I think there is a new momentum there. The one big thing is, and I will stop here, is that, post-COVID, governments know that, they're really fiscally constrained. We have a massive problem in climate. You have to get public and private aligned through the investment chain, through markets, incentivized. And that's why they need a good framework. That's why they need a proper carbon price, and then let the market do what the market does well. And I'll stop there.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a great ending kind of rallying call. And I want to end with, for the section that we've been doing here in my moderating, with our own rallying call, which is about how everybody that is in the audience can help on that journey to avoid greenwashing and achieve legitimate net zero. If you're not a lawyer, think about how you can apply some of what you've been hearing to your profession or your business. And if you're not an in-house lawyer, if you know any in-house lawyers, you could let them know about Lawyers for Net Zero via obviously our website, our LinkedIn group, etc. And then if you are an in-house lawyer, two things obviously you can do. You can join Lawyers for Net Zero, and if you want to know more, get in touch with me, adam.woodhall@lawyersfornetzero.com. And then, of course, you can get, as an in-house lawyer, you could get busy with Principle 5, just as all the panelists and Kirin have done, which is the champion net zero externally. So post about it on LinkedIn, communicate with people. So I just want to, after that little rallying call, want to finish on that high note by thanking you, the audience, for giving us your attention, the keynotes and the panelists, and particularly actually Sarah, because she has worked so hard to make this a very smooth, very professional event. And I'm very, very grateful for her support, both from the organizational side and also just as a great human being. So thank you, Sarah, and I'll hand over you to close.
Thank you, Adam. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists and to our keynote speakers, and to you, Adam, for today, and to everyone here for joining us. And just a couple of final words from me before we close. As Paul said earlier in his keynote, we're moving into an era of convergence of systemic risks. And I loved the metaphor, Paul, the storm not just being climate change, but the functioning and questioning of corporate behaviour. I would add to that if it's the role of the GC to embed into the DNA of their organisation this questioning, the role of lawyers as a whole is, I suggest, to embed this within legal systems and practice. And that's really what esela is about. In tackling the systemic challenges, there's a lot to think about. And as you might know from previous esela events, these are very much interconnected conversations, and we could have taken this in a number of directions. We've not, for example, today dug into the role of net zero in impact investment, or looked at how purpose-led businesses are engaging with this, or talked about how B Corp certification can accelerate meeting robust science-based targets in your net zero transition. But for more information about these topics and to stay tuned to what's coming out from esela as we share more content with you over the coming months to support the journey we're all on, we invite you to stay tuned in to the esela mailings and to explore what it means to be part of the esela community by following the link that I'll just drop in the chat. So on that note from me, I just want to say thank you to everyone and let everyone go, I think, a minute early. Wonderful to have you all here with us. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.